welcome to another Edinburgh Retro PC podcast. This is number 5, I think it is. Tonight we've got the usual gang. We have got George.
Hello.
We've got Ian.
Good evening.
And not forgetting the wonderful Mr. Campbell.
Hello.
How we all doing, lads?
Good, good. The weather's looking better outside in Scotland.
I was just saying that to my wife, actually. I said it's actually looking like summer's kind of finally arriving, eh?
It's weird. It's weird being daylight outside, isn't it?
I know.
Clocks changed last week as well, didn't they?
So we all had nice weekends. Up to anything exciting? Anything particularly exciting?
Saturday down the beach.
Down the beach? No, that
I was down at Aberdour. That's just across the Forth Road Bridge, isn't it? In Fife. And then today I was at a car boot sale this morning. And I managed to pick up a few bits and pieces.
I heard, I was listening to a YouTube and you made a comment. There was one of the YouTubes where you can post comments. You made a comment about there was somebody selling a Master System, apparently. I like you tell the story. It's unbelievable.
So it's the indoor car boot sale at the top of Leith Walk.
Inside place, I think it is.
It's called the Omni Centre indoor car boot sale anyway. So you try and avoid, if anybody's listening to this and they want to fancy go along it, do not pay for the parking in the centre, because it's like a tenner for an hour for parking in a bit. So find parking anywhere in Leith apart from the indoor car park. So I went there the day, took the motorbike along, because you can get parked for free. That's a bonus. And I do the usuals. There's roughly about 300 to 400 stalls there. It's absolutely massive inside. Takes up a whole, one of the floors in the big car park. And I walked around. A lot of stuff wasn't even really looking at, but I found somebody selling a Mark 1 Sega Master System.
Mm-hmm.
And it was unboxed. It had about 2 games there, and I don't even know if there was a power supply for it, but you wanted 150 quid for it. And I nearly burst it laughing. And then I says, mate, I can get them cheaper on Edinburgh Gumtree. And at that point, turned around and says, if I sell it on eBay, I can get £800 for
it. You should ask him if he ever fancies taking up stand-up comedy. Bloody hell.
Yes, this guy's a genius, a comic genius. I says, good luck with that, mate.
Deary me.
But I did pick up an Xbox 360 controller for £5, a wired one, and a couple of more PlayStation 3 games. So that was enough. Yep.
You'll be absolutely gutted if you see this particular one on eBay and it's actually it's the very first model ever made and it goes for £1,000. Eh?
I know, and there's folk bidding on it as well. I'd be gutted.
Serial number 00001.
Fucking nightmare.
Well, listen, guys, this kind of moves on to this one of the first things we're going to talk about. Has anybody got we've all got a lot of the original hardware. Is there any sort of holy grail that you've been after for a long, long time, which you've finally got? And is there any holy grail thing that you'd still like to get? We'll start with you, Dave. Have you got anything that have you got your holy grail or?
No, I don't know. I'm quite lucky. There's nothing that I really hanker after desperately that would be the holy grail. Apart from, I suppose, I quite fancy getting a Vectrex or a 32X for the Sega. But I'm quite fortunate that I've managed to get all the stuff that I wanted. None of it's kind of holy grail stuff, it's just the usual bits and bobs.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say that if I was going to get anything that's expensive, it would be either a Vectrex or a 32X, but they still seem to kind of hold their value and go for over $100. So
yeah. Well, I'll just interrupt there. Funnily enough, these are the 2 things that I actually picked up fairly recently. I got a 32X. I got it for, what was it, £42, I think it was. It didn't come with an adapter, which seems to be the case when you buy anything these days on eBay, which I don't really like. But it uses the what does it use? It uses the Mark II Mega Drive power adapter.
Yeah.
So I had a wee play about with that this week, actually. Some nice games. A lot of them are absolutely stinkers, enough, but there's some really nice games. And what was the second bit of hardware you said?
A Vectrex.
The Vectrex. Aye, that was probably that was the thing when I first saw one many years ago. I thought that's what I want, and I was lucky enough about probably about 7 years ago. I got it on eBay. It was before the kind of retro started selling, prices went up through the roof. I made an offer to a guy. I got a Vectrex with one controller, 11 box games for £100 delivered. So that was quite a good price.
See, I never wanted one until I played yours at the retro clubs.
I think it's one of these bits of hardware when you actually play it and you think, oh, that's amazing, because it's so unique and the graphics haven't dated at all. They've never made anything since then, and I love it. I absolutely love it. That's probably my favourite bit of hardware that I own.
There's something unique about the Vectrex, isn't there?
It is.
Graphics,
It's never been done since then, sort of thing. So I've kind of answered my question. What about yourself, Ian? Have you got anything that you've hankered after for a long time you've now got, or is there something you'd like to get if it,
for a long time now I've been looking to get a Neo Geo system.
A proper one, not the cheapo one that came out recently.
Yeah, a kind of proper Neo Geo AES is the kind of home version, But then recently I kind of came to the realization that obviously the console is really, really expensive to start off with. You're talking maybe 250, maybe 300 quid for a good kind of condition one. But that's not the big issue. The big issue is the AES software, which can go anything from 50 quid to literally thousands for some cartridges, because they're just quite rare. So I kind of realised I'm never going to bother getting an AES system. And this also coincides with my other kind of holy grail as well, which was to start collecting JAMA PCB boards, arcade machine boards.
All right.
Something that I'm sure Dave knows quite a bit about, yeah?
Well, a wee bit, and you're going to get Supergun or something to hook them up.
Yeah, so I joined up some arcade forums. There's a forum called JAMA Plus. .co.uk and UK VAC, it's the Video Arcade Collectors. And I made contact with a guy on there who sells, he kind of custom designed his own JAMA Supergun. Supergun plugs into any JAMA arcade board and allows you to run it on a regular TV. And you can plug it in, you can plug in regular controllers. So he's made adapters for PlayStation 2 controllers, adapters for SNES controllers. You can plug in pretty much anything as long as you have the adapter cable. So I got this Supergun and I got a PlayStation 2 adapter from another guy on the JAMA Plus forums. I also got a Neo Geo MVS, which is the arcade version that's designed to plug into any arcade cabinet, and a copy of Puzzle Bobble on the Neo Geo. And it all arrived on kind of Thursday, Friday last week, and it's all hooked up to a PC power supply and a Sony CRT television, and it's all working great. So I'm happy. I can start collecting more Neo Geo stuff now as well.
Nice.
That sounds very impressive.
Plus, as well, this also means I can start collecting JAMA arcade boards as well. So I've bought a copy of, I bought a PCB earlier. It's World Rally. I think you saw me playing it at the last club night,
yeah.
And these, obviously some PCBs go for, hundreds, but this one was quite common, and I got it for 40 quid off eBay. So happy with that.
Super.
It's impressive. Yeah. What's more impressive is the fact you got that whole haul past your wife. Did you take the day off, I take it?
What's really impressive to me is the fact that it all works, because it's all parts from different people. So I've got the Supergun as a separate purchase, the MVS boards as a separate purchase, the power supply is separate, everything's all separate. And I had a few kind of teething problems at first. It turns out that my PlayStation 2 controller was faulty. And it wasn't, I was getting problems kind of like moving around and pressing buttons and stuff. And I wasn't sure. I was like, oh, here we go. Is it going to be the Supergun that's at fault? Is it going to be the power supply that's at fault? Or is it going to be the Neo Geo board? And eventually I plugged the PlayStation 2 controller into my PlayStation 2 and found out it was a controller that was knackered. So up to CEX yesterday and bought 2 more PS2 controllers.
So how are you going to mount all this then? Are you going to buy a cab of some sort? Or what?
No, well, no plans for a cabinet here. There's just no room for that here. Not in this house.
Oh, man, you've got a suite. You can surely convert that to a cabin.
Just cut a hole in the suite and mount the monitor on the top of the suite.
Well, you could
Coffee
have,
table, yeah.
you could have one of these. There's a website, the worst meme cabs, and like somebody had like a coffee table, and it flips up with this monitor. Like, oh,
Just
have
use
one of them.
just cut a hole in the kitchen work surface,
Oh, that's an idea.
and you can mount the joystick and the monitor and everything on it. I'm surprised it's not been done, hey.
You'll probably find it has been.
All right, love.
Be yourself,
I'm just-
George.
all right, love. Just away for the weekend. Keep the kitchen tidy. I ain't bother. Get jigsaw out. Me, I would love. Recently, I've just been watching some reviews of the Sharp X68000. I'd love
Oh, aye.
one of them.
Yeah.
Me too.
So it was only sold in Japan,
Yep.
but the odd one does come up for sale over here in Britain. The only thing you've got to watch them is the power supplies are a bit flaky in them.
Right.
But I think they're fantastic machines. The games that came out for it they were all arcade quality.
Yep.
And I love the fact it's got the double 5 1/4 inch soft eject floppy drives and that in it. And I think there was a later one that came out that had a hard drive in it. Other machines, I'd love a Amiga 1200 Tower with an 060 processor. That would be cool to have. The ultimate Amiga 1200. And also, I would love a Apple Macintosh SE.
The classic one, yeah.
The classic one, I'd love one of them. So, Dave, if you manage to pick up an Apple Macintosh, I'll swap you for a Vectrex.
Keep my eyes peeled.
Actually, just you're mentioning the 68,000 Sharp. One of the guys that's been along our club before, Paul, he actually, I think I told you, he sent me a message a couple of weeks ago. He picked up one up on Gumtree. He said he got it for a really good price. So, how much do they go for on eBay?
I'm guessing about
Silly
at
money.
least £300-400 at
Oh.
least, I think.
Deary me.
Anyway, probably even more. I'm trying to think. I'll have a wee Google now to see how much. If you want to keep yapping away, I'll have a look, see how much they're going for.
I
Yeah,
think I've looked
yeah.
myself
Have you?
for that, and there's very rarely come up. There's none just now in the UK that I can see.
As I know right now.
Yeah.
There's a guy on a forum that I'm a member of, and he's decided he's had one of these moments. He's got a kid now, and he's decided to get rid of everything, his whole entire retro collection. And I think one of the original Apple Macs might be one of the things that he's got, George. I'll ask him.
That'd be nice,
There was a couple of things that he was selling that I quite fancied, which I've since decided not to get because I can't afford them. He was selling an Auric Atmos, and he was also selling, what was that thing I told you about, George? It's the Commodore with the built screen.
It's a Commodore S64.
Yeah.
It's a portable 64.
Aye. I thought, that would be pretty cool to have. Thing is, he offered everything up for sale about a week ago, and folk have said, I'll have that. And he's never come back with any prices or anything, so I thought,
right.
Heck, you know what, after I kind of had time to think about it, I thought, don't bother. I'll not
I
pick
mean,
it up, but
I would love the portable 64, but as I said to you, Alan, they're hideously expensive, and they're quite flaky, and they're a nightmare.
Yeah.
You can't get spares for them. It's not like an average bread bin 64. You can get hundreds of spares,
Aye.
but one of them, they can be quite tricky.
It's funny when you actually told me that was part of the reason I thought, you know what, I'm not going to bother, because that's actually laid on to a question I thought I was going to discuss tonight. Well, I mean, obviously old hardware, there's, the common machines, your Spectrum, your Commodore, you can pick up parts, capacitors, whatever it is. What happens when a really vintage machine goes down? I mean, what happens? You're basically stuck with a machine that you can't do anything with it, I'm guessing, eh?
Yep.
I would imagine I'm always amazed that there's guys out there have invented all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and they're retrofitting boards into things. Like when I did my Atari 7800 mod, someone, took apart an Atari, ripped out the RF modulator, and built a composite board for it.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't know where to start with that. So I would imagine that there's, some guy somewhere will have an equivalent. If one of the capacitors pops in your Commodore 6 or whatever, they'll have a modern equivalent board that they'll be able to build. There's all sorts of clever guys out there. I'm sure someone somewhere has come up with something.
I mean, for your home, for your own kind of personal fixes, there is a piece of equipment that's came out that Maplin sell, and it allows you to test for dodgy capacitors in circuit on a lot of these old retro equipment. So if you suspect a capacitor is dodgy, this piece of equipment allows you to test it without having to rip the board to bits, but it's 90 quid for the piece of hardware. But it's worth it if it fixes some of your machines. It's quite good. But
I'm no electronics expert, but can you use a multimeter for the majority of stuff? Yeah.
Certain things, yeah.
The capacitors need to be disconnected from the board so you can test
Well,
them.
normally they've got to be tested, and there's a specific cap test you need to do it. But this one allows you to leave the capacitor on the circuit board, and it gives you very accurate readings and tells you what the capacitor is and what it should be, doing. So
cool.
Okay,
I'm trying to. I can't remember the name now, but I will post up on Facebook.
Hey, what, George? You buy one, and if we can all take to you to fix.
I'm guessing, Alan, that a lot of the older stuff is going to be more repairable than some of the more modern stuff. Things like PlayStation 2, you know, where everything gets smaller.
Yeah,
it gets more difficult to fix. I mean, for example, the perfect example is the PlayStation 2 controller that I found wasn't working. And there was two buttons, the triangle and circle wasn't working, and some of the L and R buttons weren't working either, but everything else was working fine. So I stripped it down. Normally on a kind of older controller, it'd be a case of stripping it down, clearing the contacts, bish bash bosh, job done, you know. But the PS2 controller, it's got this kind of wacky kind of floppy membrane inside it. Yep. And I think most of the problems stem from the fact that the buttons on a PS2 controller are kind of pressure sensitive. So it knows how hard you're pressing them, and these things are quite common to fail. And from Googling around forums and stuff like that, these controllers are designed not to be repairable. You've basically got to get a new PCB part for it, and getting it off. I mean, these are quite modern PS2 controllers, and I could not get that little membrane to come out for the life of me. I could not get it without practically ripping it off.
They are actually stuck down. Because if you do pull one, I've pulled one apart. I've pulled three apart, but it's a kind of it's almost like a wee waveform underneath it, like a sine wave, and there's a layer of, I don't know if it's contact gel that sits between them, and the membrane actually is stuck to the contact board, and so a daughter board controls the sort of pressure sensitivity, because when you open up, there's a wee daughter board underneath the start and select buttons. And they're just a nightmare because you can't trace the cables either, because there's one of them, they're a bit like kind of shifters in arcades. If you put it in a certain position, it's not, that switches that cable. It's a combination of 2 or 3 cables make one switch, and it's a blooming nightmare to try.
The controller that I got from CEX, so it's obviously it's an older black model, not the silver one that came in my slimline PS2, and the little membrane for that is just kind of placed on top of the circuit board, and there's a bit of foam that pushes it down from the top to make the connections, and it's not actually stuck in there. So that may be repairable in the future. I mean, there's people in Hong Kong selling the kind of the membranes, but there's no way you would get out the silver one. It's impossible to remove without completely tearing the thing to bits. And I believe that third-party PS2 controllers don't use that system. They use the kind of more traditional, everything's on a PCB type thing, and they're probably more repairable. Third-party stuff may be more repairable than the original manufacturer stuff.
I had, about 6 months ago, my daughter was playing my PS3 and spilt juice on the controller, and I noticed that one of the shoulder pads wasn't working, so I looked at a YouTube video and I thought, that looks alright, so I took it to bits, and it's like when I took the top off, things went ping, pong, ping, and pinging everywhere.
Yeah, that's
and about half an hour later, I flung the lot in the bucket. It was working fine apart from one shoulder button. If I'd probably stuck it in the heating cupboard, it would have fixed itself. But I thought I'll fix it myself, and I ended up just the whole thing ended up in the bucket.
These PlayStation controllers seem to be very, very fragile. I mean, I've been through two silver PS2 controllers now have died, and when I bought a PS3 towards the end of last year, within about a month or two, the DualShock 3 controller packed in as well. It kept disconnecting from the console. Yep. And that was a return, send the controller back to Sony again, eventually got replaced. So, I mean, these things must be... I mean, I look after my stuff, I don't throw it around. I mean, you see the kind of state of some of the stuff you get off eBay. It looks like it's been thrown against a wall 25 times, My stuff's never thrown, it's never dropped, maybe accidentally on a carpet or something like that. But I just find these things to be quite fragile. I don't know what you guys think.
Have you got a preference, Ian? What do you say is, out the two of them, what do you think is the better controller? The Xbox 360 controller or the PlayStation 3 controller? Ergonomically, what do you think is better?
I use a 360 controller for things like MAME on the PC. I've got a wired one.
Yeah.
I did try and use my PSC controller on the PC, but I couldn't get that working properly, so I gave up on that. So I think for that reason, I probably prefer the Xbox 360 controller. I think you can use the PSC controller on Android.
Oh, right.
So that'd be
you can. Yeah,
right.
I think from what's the best controller standpoint, I'd probably say the Microsoft one is the best.
Right.
I think it's that. I mean, both controllers are excellent.
More durable, anyway.
I probably kind of err towards the 360 controller. I think it's really nice. But actually, just one little thing I was going to mention about talking about the Holy Grails, something that I picked up just about 2-3 weeks ago. I don't know what. In fact, I was watching a video about something, and it was the Virtual Boy. And I thought, I'm just going to have a wee look on eBay, and they're going for stupid money. And then one of my mates, he lives down south, he says, I've got one up in the loft, he says, and it doesn't get used. And so he gave me named a price. It was a really good price he gave it to me for. So that thing arrived about 2 weeks ago. It's come with 16 games. Wow. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 sort of duplicates, but absolutely love it. It's a cracking piece of hardware. I mean, I know there's a lot of it flopped. It was only out for a year. People talk about, getting headaches and that kind of stuff. It's not the kind of thing you could sit and play for any length of time, but as a collectible, and it's the very same as the Vectrex. It's such a unique piece of hardware. Apparently, like the 3Ds, it's they use spinning mirrors and all this kind of thing. It rotates at 15,000 times a minute and all this kind of stuff. So I'm guessing it's the kind of thing, if you dropped it, it would probably be, that would be a bucket job.
That's what you want. That's what you want right next to your eyes, isn't it? 15,000 RPM mirrors coming at you.
Actually, I posted it. I don't normally post things on Facebook about retro collecting, but I posted a picture of that, and one of my mates, or he's a mate, he said, "I'll get it off you once you die of a brain tumour."
That's a cunning plan, isn't it?
And that was a friend of yours, yeah?
Well, he says he is, so.
So, Alan, 16 games is quite a good start, because there's not that many games for the Virtual Boy, is there?
I think there's 22 or 24.
So you've almost got a full collection.
Almost got already. A full collection there,
So are you missing anything kind of rare and expensive?
Yeah, there's the usual. There's a couple of games. I have some bowling games, something else that goes for stupid money, but apparently there is one of these flash cart things you can pick up. But I don't know. I'm quite happy. I've got plenty of games up there to play as well. Anyway, so that was a holy grail for me, and it was one of these things that just popped up, and I thought, I've got to get it, and I knew I wouldn't get the opportunity very often to get something like that. So.
I see you can get a Game Boy emulator for the Virtual Boy as well now.
Game Boy. Well, man, you emulate a Game Boy on a Virtual Boy?
Yeah. So it's obviously it's really kind of massive, right in front of your eyes screen. It must run on a flash card of some description. I don't know how you can get on otherwise.
There's a lot of homebrew that have come out for the Virtual Boy as well, so it might be something. If I got one for a decent price, I'd maybe pick it up, because it was kind of open. It'd be quite interesting to see some new games, written for it.
It was kind of similar. I had a shot of a Oculus Rift a couple of weeks ago as well, and I had a shot of there was a Game Boy emulator for that as well. So you've got the so it's basically you've got the kind of Oculus Rift on, and you're in this kind of room, and there's like a 60-foot screen in front of you, and it was running Zelda, Game Boy Zelda. It was quite impressive.
Cool. The only thing downside about the Oculus Rift is Facebook have bought it. So I don't know what's going to happen to that, but I've had a shot on one as well. At Edinburgh College, I think they're awesome.
One of my friends was desperate for a shot. I think he's actually still in mourning. He was devastated when Facebook bought Oculus Rift.
Yeah.
But he's desperate for a shot. So if anybody's got an Oculus Rift that they want to give him a shot,
they're cheaper than what you think, Dave, to buy one.
Couple £100, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them on Gumtree, £250, and it's been tempting to buy one. Like,
is it not getting the PC rig to actually run the bloody thing that's going to be the problem?
No, I think it'll run in a kind of.
Raspberry Pi, brilliant.
No, it'll run in kind of most recent kind of PC, as long as it's like a 4-core thing. It'll run all right.
Quite a modest rig. I think the graphics card's the most important thing. But the machine that we had it running on was like a small one of these micro Intel boxes, a gigabyte box. Pretty much, about the size of two cigarette packets on top of each other, and that was running it perfectly. There was no problems with that.
Wow.
Superb.
I'm saying one way to tell you're a retro gamer is when you buy the latest cutting edge bit of hardware, and the first thing you do is look for a Spectrum emulator.
And you
for it.
run Zelda on it, yeah. Game Boy emulator.
I think things like Mario 64 would be cool on it. If that was 3D.
Yeah.
Aye, that would be. That would be.
Alien Breed 3D, that's what you want on it.
Anyway, guys, we'll move on to another one of the subjects. Worst software houses back in the day. Was there any particular software house that, in your mind, was was terrible, sold really poor games? We'll start with you, Dave.
You always pick on me.
You must have there must be a lot to pick from being an Amstrad owner, eh? I mean,
Wow.
ouch.
It's a bit harsh.
The signal was breaking up there. I'll
Sorry, mate.
Aye, very good. No, I'm trying to there were a few that I personally didn't like, but I think it's down to personal taste, because obviously some folk would have loved the games. There was Bug Bite and a few other companies that did kind of very cheap games at the beginning, but I don't know. I mean, I think I'm looking at my shelf here for inspiration, but there's games there for pretty much every company under the sun. So I don't know, and I can't think of one off the top of my head.
I've got a good one.
Specific.
I used to go to John Menzies when I was younger, and obviously didn't have a lot of money, so I had to buy the cheaper games that were on sale at the time for the Spectrum. So at that point, Mastertronic were quite popular for bringing out games that were £1.99 or £1.50 a game, and I made the mistake of buying some of the Mastertronic games, and were friggin' awful, to be honest with you.
Bionic Granny, anyone?
Every game that I bought that was Mastertronic, load it once, play it, and then chuck it in the bin.
You obviously never bought Formula 1 Simulator then. That was brilliant.
I bet most of the Mastertronic games, now there might be some gems out there, but the ones that I played for Specky were done.
Yeah, I know the very early kind of games, even for the Commodore 64, you had like your Bionic Granny and all that. It was all Tat. They were really, really, really poor. But I think after about a year or so, they started to find their form. They were bringing out things like, as Dave says, Formula 1 Simulator.
Right.
Was that a Mastertronic one, Dave? Was that not Codemasters?
You're thinking Grand Prix Simulator. Formula 1.
Oh, right. What did you say?
Formula 1 Simulator.
Formula 1, right.
Was it a good game, Dave?
It was cracking. It was a first person, in quotes. It was, you sat in your car, and you could pick, I think it was about 6 tracks, cracking music. Maybe I'm just taking it because it was the first game I ever bought for my Amstrad, but it was great. But you could, if you drove it in manual, it was a 6-speed manual, but you could blow your engine if you kind of overread it and stuff.
It
was
cool.
cracking. I still play it. I can still remember the tune and everything. Finders Keepers was the second game I bought, and that's a lot of shit.
Aye.
Yep.
Excellent. What about yourself, Ian? Is there any particular software house that you'd think that was really poor?
Yeah, there were a couple. You remember Cascade Software?
Oh,
With the watch?
Free watch, yeah.
Yeah. Let's bribe people to buy this by giving away a free calculator watch thing. Yeah. And I think did they not buy a load of games like written in BASIC by kids that were like 14-year-old or something like that, and then they gave them 20 quid. Thanks for the game, and then bundled them all 50 of them onto a cassette with a free watch. And they were pretty much. They were all crap. Let's be honest. They were
going to be garbage because they were called like generic things like Sky Chase,
but then
Block Attack.
But at the time, you say that now, but when you're 13 years old, right, and you see someone that's got 50 games for $9.99, I mean that's you doubling your collection straight away, almost,
instantly.
Isn't it? So, imagine some of the faces. I mean, I never bought it myself, but it's a thing of legend, isn't it? But imagine if they kind of look, these kids who have saved and saved for other pocket money for months and months and months, and load up the first game and go, oh God.
No, it's more likely that your parents would buy it thinking that's a good deal for my son.
I hate my son.
I've got you 50 games for your Commodore for Christmas.
That'll keep you busy.
And I've got your watch as well. But that's for your birthday.
I have a copy of that. If anybody wants to play it, I have a copy of it for myself.
Did you,
So,
did you get to watch it? Or was this one you picked up second hand?
It's one I picked up second hand just for pure nostalgia to remember how it
I
actually
bet you that goes for a song on eBay, an original with the watch.
with a watch, possibly. Aye.
Yeah.
uh,
But
this-
sorry, Ian.
So I was going to say that the other one that I was thinking about for software houses. Do you remember the Kings of the NES movie tie-in is LJN?
Oh my god.
Remember them? And it's got like a little kind of rainbow kind of logo for the J. And they pumped out some rubbish, really did. There was this rubbish kind of movie tie-ins that had no relation to the movie whatsoever. I think they were responsible for things like the kind of Total Recall game and that kind of thing. I'm sure they did that kind of thing, and they were just awful stuff.
No, the one that really stuck out for me, again, I suppose you could say a lot of if you think a company or poor software, tends to be the very early stuff, and at the end of the day, back in the day, anything sold, and as you say, you know, anything at all, it was a game, it'll sell, you know, it didn't matter if it was crap or not, but there was a company, I think they did make software for the Spectrum as well, called Interceptor Micros, or I think was it Interceptor Software. I would say that virtually every single game that they brought out was absolutely pish. I mean, it was the early 80s, you know, so every game was like, you know, you had Burger Time and they came out, what did they call it? I don't know what the hell it was called, but they brought out all these versions of, you know, the arcade games, and they were just really, really piss poor. I was unfortunate when I first got my Commodore 64. I bought two of their games. One was Crazy Kong and one was Frogger 64. And Crazy Kong, I mean, this was the very first computer game that I actually owned. I put it on, and after about 10 minutes, I thought, this is pish. That was all I had. I had that or bloody Frogger.
And the thing is as well, when we were young, we had a fantastic imagination, which helped with some of these games, but you have to draw your line with some of them.
Aye. But even then, as it's been the first game I played, I realised this was crap.
I'm just looking at someone's selling the Cascade 50 tape on eBay now for £1.75 buy now, one watcher.
Bargain.
And the cassette tape, it says Spectrum Cascade Classic 50 fantastic games on one cassette.
That wasn't the guy that was selling the guy that was selling the Master System, was it?
No, I hope no.
Dear me.
Funny.
Superb. Excellent. Right, moving on swiftly. We all play MAME, I'm guessing. We all play MAME.
Yeah.
What was the very first time you became aware of MAME? And what kind of effect did it have on you? Or, you know, what was your response when you first saw it? How did you find out about it? George, what about yourself?
I think it must have been about, fucking hell, I'm trying to think when it came out. I think the first version of MAME...
97 it came out.
I think the first version of MAME I couldn't really play a lot of the games because my machine...
Sorry, George, just to backtrack.
Right.
How did you become aware of it?
I became aware of it just with mates that have had it, I think.
Somebody told you about it then?
Somebody told me about it. And when I got it and I tried to play a lot of the games, a lot of them wouldn't play properly on the machine I had at the time, so I had to wait a while to upgrade the PC I had before I could play MAME, you know, kind of half decently. But yeah, I just heard through a mate, I think.
Yeah, and what was your thoughts when you first...
I thought
did
great.
It really jump out at you as being something?
Oh, aye, it's great because, I mean, you play all the arcade games you used to play as a kid, and you don't have to put 10 pence in the slot. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, really good.
Dave, what about yourself?
Randomly, I became aware of it. I became aware of it in an Amiga magazine, and the first iteration of MAME I ever played was on an Amiga 1200.
Really? Was it out for the Amiga? I didn't know that.
Yep, it came out for the Amiga. You could download it off of Aminet, you possibly still can. But it played at like 3 frames a second. And it's just, even like Pac-Man, you know, instead of him going waka waka, he kind of goes bloop, 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 bloop. It's totally weird. But I was excited at the prospect of it. And when I got my first PC, it was one of the first things I tracked down. I just Googled it and loaded it and went daft. And like George says, the early iterations, you could only play, you know, the Space Invaders, the kind of early stuff.
Yeah.
The Galaxian, which was one of my faves. And the obsession's just grown up to the point now that I was put away the day on my MAME cabinet setting it up. But
yeah,
I just love it. It's great.
Aye. Ian, what about yourself?
I think I became first aware of MAME just through kind of being on other kind of emulation forums. Pretty much the first emulator I played was a thing called Sparkade.
Remember that.
And I think I remember firing up Galaxian and stuff on that and thinking this is going to be just amazing because, like what George says, you don't have to pump 10p's into them. And I think back then, those machines were still around sometimes. You would go to the kind of these like travelling fairs and they still have Galaxian and stuff there. And you think this is just going to be a game changer. I don't have to go and spend money anymore. It's fantastic. And I think from hanging around doing that kind of experimenting with other emulators, just eventually someone on one of the forums piped up and says, "Oh, there's a new one out now. It's called MAME." And I think that's just how I came aware of it. Just that's
I think bonus 5 points. What does MAME stand for?
Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator. Yeah.
Well, homework. Good stuff. Yeah. Well, MAME for me, it was a game changer. I remember it was 1997 and a mate phoned me. I just got the internet. That's when you had to run the extension cable down the stairs and plug into your dial-up modem, and it was like 10 pence a minute and all that kind of shit. So you had to set your watch. I've got half an hour and then I need to come off. Yeah. But my mate phoned me and he says, "You're never going to believe," because back then I was still into my sort of retro games, but he said, "You're never going to believe what I can get for you." And I'm, what is it? He says, Galaxians and all that. I'm like, aye. I can get you the real arcade versions. And I'm like, what? This was just like mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. And sure enough, he said, when can you get it? And he was going to see some guy in Whitburn a couple of days later, and I was going to go down and get it. And so, of course, I was like, I kept thinking about it the whole time, real Galaxians, all this kind of stuff. Or Galaxian, I should say. I like people call it Galaxians, it's Galaxian. And anyway, I think it was like the Tuesday he was supposed to be getting this disc for me. And then, of course, I phoned him up on the Tuesday. "Oh, have you got it?" No, I didn't go through. Fucking hell. So anyway, it went on, but eventually I got a hold of this. I think it was a floppy disk, it'd probably be at the time. Yep. And I put this thing on, and, up came 35 games, Pac-Man, Space Invaders. And when I started it, I'm just like, this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. I just couldn't, as far as I was concerned, this was the arcade cabs that I had on my PC. It just absolutely blew my mind.
Did you shed a tear?
To my mind, no matter anything that I've got in games, the games thing, MAME is the best thing ever, in my opinion. It's just awesome, absolutely awesome. But what was I going to say? But the funny thing was, I didn't have an internet connection at that point. I remember going down to my mate's house, and one of my favourite games was Rolling Thunder and Year Kung Fu, and we managed to find the ROMs and we downloaded them and we put them into it, and it's like, how come it's not showing up? And then it was only later on that we realised that you had to actually support it. We thought that you could just download any arcade ROM and it would just run it, which wasn't the case. You had to sort of wait for different versions came out. And you used to eagerly be updating it. It was like Dave's Video Game Classics, it was called. That was the site to go to kind of thing. And that, version 35.2 supports Year Kung Fu. It was like somebody was giving you this arcade game for your Christmas. It was like absolutely awesome. You can probably tell I like MAME, but to me that is the biggest sort of gaming thing that's ever come out. I love it way more than anything else that I've got.
Superb.
Brilliant. Let's see. Retro hardware add-ons. Is there any sort of particular piece of a hardware add-on that you can think of that's sort of your favourite? Anything, Dave? You got anything?
If you're talking proper retro stuff, I've managed to build. I've still got my original Amiga 1200 that I had when I was a kid. But when I was
a kid, you make me feel old. I was a fully fledged adult when I got mine.
Well, I think I was 19 or something when I got it. But I used to flick through the Silica catalogue and kind of drool over all these add-ons that you could get, and I could never afford any of them because they were just stupid amounts of money. But now, I've got an 050 processor in my A1200. I've got a hard drive for it. I've got a CD-ROM drive for it. I've got 32 meg of RAM in it and all that kind of stuff. And it's brilliant. It flies like the proverbial shit off a shovel, and it's just fantastic. But modern kind of add-ons, like I say, I'm always amazed at these guys that come up with fantastic, ideas and just think, I'm going to build this whatever thing. to the fact that I've got a 3.5-inch floppy drive hooked up to my Amstrad 6128. And I can burn ROMs onto, I'm saying burn ROMs, I can download disk images, cut them back to a 3.5-inch disc on my PC and play it on my Amstrad. And that's like magic. It's like voodoo. So I love all that kind of stuff. But that's about it for me.
Yeah, what about yourself, George?
I think I'm like Dave. I've had my Amiga 1200 for a long time, and I've been buying loads of different add-ons for it. I bought a Massey player, which is a MP3 player add-on for the Amiga 1200. So you can. I've got an 8 gig card on the Amiga 1200 now, partitioned into 4 gigs, and I've got about a gig of music on it, so I can play all my MP3s through it. And I've added a plug-on, Dave, for Amiga amp player.
All right. So
that the Amiga amp works with the amp, the Massey player.
Aye.
So you can play music through that. And I like the fact that I'm now able to connect up to a normal VGA monitor. Because it's an Indivision internal flicker fixer, and it gives you a VGA DVI output. So it means I can have it connected to a decent VGA monitor. Because before, what I had to do is have it connect for, because the Amiga 1200 runs in 2 modes. It runs in 15 Hz for games, but the Workbench runs, is it 30 megahertz, something like that?
Is it?
30 Hz.
I didn't know that.
It runs different speeds. So if you want the kind of high res for the Workbench and wanting the games looking good, you really need something like that. But yeah, that's the kind of thing I like, the Amiga 1200.
One thing that's always kind of puzzled me is, games, obviously when the Amiga came out, there was only you didn't have all these extra fancy processors and that. So games were written to run in that hardware. What benefit is there to adding all this extra memory? I mean, Dave, you said you've got 32 mega memory and all that kind of stuff. What's and putting an accelerator card in, what advantage do you get from it?
Well, a lot of the early stuff, you don't get any advantage. It was when things started to change, like
3D and that sort of stuff.
Aye, when Alien Breed 3D and all that came out, that would run in Gloom, all the sort of first-person shooters. When the Amiga tried to keep up with the PCs, it came out with all these first-person shooters and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of them needed a graphics card, just like a PC. But the trouble, because the market was dying, it didn't have the impetus behind it. Otherwise, great things could have happened. But there's all sorts of good games came out kind of towards the end of the Amiga's life or just after it, like TFX, and there was a Final Lap, which was a 3D kind of virtual racing type game.
Oh, that was right.
They're great, but you need an accelerator or they'll just no run.
Yeah. I mean, you can get Doom for the Amiga 1200, but you need at least an 040 card. Mine's the card that I've got is an 030, which is, it'll play Doom, but no at a kind of respectable rate. The 040 or the 050 card that Dave's got plays Doom really smooth. And you need more memory for things like, for start off with, if you want to play games that are WHD loaders and you've got something like iGame loaded, basically what it does is it loads the game into RAM first, or if it's maybe a game that's got 5 discs, it'll load all the games through WHD Loader into RAM, and then you play the game, so you don't really notice any issues with having to load different floppy drives and that. And so you do it for things like that as well. I think you need at least 4 megabit of RAM. I think I've went ridiculous. I think I've got 75 mega RAM in mind, which is over the top, Dave.
But that seems a ridiculous comment, and it's 75 mega RAM.
It's the only reason was I didn't have a smaller one at hand when I bought the accelerator. There wasn't any memory, and I managed to pick one up locally, cheap. An old is it IDEO, whatever it is, really old RAM.
Sim.
Sim, whatever it is. But yeah, that's what you use it for, games like that.
Yeah,
anything that's WHD load or that.
Even older ones, to be fair. I forgot about Jeff Crammond's Formula 1.
Right.
Grand Prix. That runs beautifully on even if you've got like an 030 processor with 16 mega RAM in it or something like that. Runs beautifully.
I'd imagine Stunt Car Racer would look really nice.
That goes like a rate of knots.
That'd be nice. I'd like to see that.
Smoother.
Have you tried iGame, Dave, on the Amiga 1200?
I didn't install it, to be honest, because just because I've got all my stuff partitions into folders, like I've got all my games kind of stuff partitioned. And I just do it the kind of old way, because iGame's just it's like the main UI browser.
It is, yeah, yep.
So yeah, I just went old school for it because you needed an extra overhead as well. I've got WHD Load. I actually bought that. I registered it. So I've got all that kind of stuff set up. But yeah, I don't use the front end.
I finally bit the bullet and bought WH Loader last week. So that's about £15, but it's well worth it.
I would encourage anybody listening to buy it rather than kind of hack it, because the guy that wrote it and still supports it, and he's very quick to get back with your keys and all that kind of stuff. It's a great. So
as you say, if people don't buy it, then guys like that just aren't going to make products like that. You know what I mean? So they always want to support it.
It makes your Amiga totally usable, There's that you're used to now instead of loading 15 floppies. So yeah, I would thoroughly encourage it. That's my sales pitch. Go buy WH.
Yeah, same. I'll second that.
Yeah, I would say my favourite, or not my favourite, but one of my sort of bitsy retro hardware add-ons, not counting the modern stuff like your SD adapters and that kind of stuff. Back in the day was what was it called? Freeze frame cartridge for the Commodore 64.
Oh, yeah.
That just revolutionised my piracy.
So I think it allows you to save straight to tape or floppy.
Brilliant, George. Basically, you had the cartridge plugged in, load the game. As soon as it started, press the little red button, and it just saved it to disk. And it even created a little loader program. So I would have like 10 games on a disk, and they loaded them within like 10-15 seconds.
Brilliant.
It's the kind of thing. If you do want to use the real Commodore 64 discs, then it's the kind of thing you need to seek out. I've no idea. They probably go for really stupid money.
It'd be great if you could shove someone on the Facebook page, Alan, because I've never heard of that adapter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I will do.
And did it fit in the cartridge slot on the?
It did, just the back of the machine. So you just press red button, and it basically just took a snapshot of what was called freeze frame. It just basically that was it. And it just automatically, as soon as you press the button, it would save it to disk, and then you could just switch it on and off and boot it back up, so.
I've got one. I'll bring it to the next meeting.
Have you really?
Right, cool.
Aye.
Oh,
cool.
Superb.
And it's maybe a variant of the one you've got, but it does the same thing.
I think there was different ones. I think there was different versions, but it was absolutely sweet as a peanut.
You can have take it away and play with it.
A friend of mine had a similar thing for the Super Nintendo.
Oh, aye.
Where I think it was one of the kind of earliest cartridge copiers where it dumped the data to either a floppy disk, or you could connect a PC via a serial port, and you could put a cartridge in. This thing sat on top of the SNES, and he would put a cartridge in it that he read for the shop or from Blockbuster or something like that. You press a button, and it would dump the contents out to the PC. And he would sit with this kind of all-in-one compact machine next to his SNES, and he could browse a big list of ROMs, and then he could hit the send button, which would send it very, very slowly down a serial link to this device. You're talking like a minute or two, and he could play all of his SNES games that way, which I thought was quite impressive.
Ian, was it called the Super Wildcard?
It was. It was one of the earliest ones. I think it was the one. I think it was the one before the floppy disk came out. Before they came out with the kind of floppy disk version, and it just had a serial port.
I just sold one recently.
Yeah,
I had one. See, I'm never a big fan of the SNES. I'm a big fan of the NES, but I'm not a big fan of the SNES. So I sold that Super Wildcard with a SNES attached to it with a couple of games on floppy.
Yeah,
because I wasn't using it. But I know the thing you're on about. Pretty cool.
Just the fact that he had to have his PC next to his SNES to store all his games on.
Right.
There was no floppy drive in it, and he would send it on a serial cable. Kind of the original kind of SNES piracy. The problem with the SNES is that a lot of the games have custom chips, and you could forget about those. Those wouldn't work, unless you had a kind of similar cartridge with the same chip in it. You can maybe put it in, and it would use that kind of thing. But
so that's the Super Graphics chip that was in a lot of the
Super FX chip.
Super FX chips now.
Pilot Wings.
See when you go for the EverDrive cart for the SNES, does that support these types of games?
It doesn't. No.
It doesn't when you first buy it. I mean, I've got one. It doesn't support when you first buy it, but apparently you can actually take the effect. Well, no, it's not the FX chip. You can take the chip out of one, like, a Super Mario Kart, and you can actually fit it in yourself, apparently.
Yeah.
Oh, right,
I
cool.
don't know if it's a question of just pushing it in,
A solder job, I think, no?
Is it?
I think it is. I think the other problem with SNES stuff is there's more than one of these kind of chips. There's the Super FX chip, and there's maybe 5 or 6 kind of other custom chips that came along in the life of the SNES. Maybe only one game uses it, so it's not important,
Yeah, I think the only games that I can recall off the top of my head is obviously you've got Super Mario Kart, you've got Pilot Wings, then you've got the what do you call it, Star Fox, and then there was like the Star Fox they brought out a sort of beach buggy type of game that used the FX card.
Stunt Race FX.
That's right. I think that'd be the only. I think they're the only 4 that are unsupported. I'm not aware of anything else.
And Alan, if you don't have a solder, just use Blue Tack to stick it in place.
There's actually about 15 or 16 different custom chips used in various cartridges. A lot of them probably, Japanese stuff, not important, but I believe there's another kind of SD card adapter for a SNES. It's not an EverDrive. I think it's maybe an SD to SNES. It's called,
right?
And that does support multiple versions of these chips. But I think you're talking hundreds of pounds for this. It's not a cheap thing. Right. Not that the EverDrive's cheap in itself, but I think this is double, triple the price.
Yep.
Yeah. Funny, just we're touching on piracy there. Just made me think of something.
Favourite topic, huh?
Yeah, I know. I could talk forever about it. Back in the day, before John Menzies and all that started stocking software, there was only one computer shop in Livingston that existed, and I used to go up there on a Saturday and just spend the whole day in the place and just mosey about. And if the guy was an Italian guy that actually owned it, and he was primarily an Atari stockist, and although he had some kind of Commodore 64 stuff, but when we eventually got our Atari STs, we chipped in and bought was it Pro Copy, I think it was called. It was like 60 quid or something for this disc. And what we used to do, we used to go up to his shop, and because we bought the computer off him and all that, he knew us and that, and he trusted us. So he would, what's the latest game, Ray? Oh, I've got this such and such, this Psygnosis game, Pteropods. Oh, let's see it. And then he used to have this wee cupboard he went in, and he had a kettle and all that, and he used to let us play the games. And then some days we'd go in there and we'd stick Pro Copy in and we'd copy him when he was in the cupboard.
Did you lock him in the cupboard?
Apparently he went bust a few months after, I don't know why.
Do you know what? One of my first jobs before working full time when I was still at school was working for a guy who supplied all the local computer shops. And he used to turn up to my house once a month with a big bread crate thing full of tapes, and it was my job to load them up one at a time and see if they actually worked, because there were games that folk had bought, obviously went, that shit, returned it or copied it, whatever, and taken it back. So I had to see which ones were genuinely bust, and he used to pay me in games. I used to get 15 games a month for trying it.
Awesome.
So I had a huge collection back in the day. It was good.
Cool.
Can I just say that Edinburgh Retro PC does not condone piracy.
It's neither big nor clever.
Pay for all your software, kids.
Yeah. Even if you want a Z81, pay for your software.
Good. The next one, moving on, type in listings. Did anybody type them in? Dave will not be old enough.
I'm old enough, yes. I sat with my Amstrad, that old beast that you don't like, but I sat with the manual. There was a blackjack game in the manual, and I sat and typed it in, all 640 lines of it. And at the end of it, you had to type run to run the game, funnily enough. And I typed run with a quote, and it said, press play on tape. I was like,
oh no.
I hit escape, it reset itself, so that was 4 hours of typing.
Nightmare.
4 hours of your life you'll never get back again, eh?
And that kind of put me off. So I didn't type a lot of them in, I have to say.
What about you, George?
I think I started, believe it or not, I started typing in games when I had my first X81, and I was a bit like, same kind of experience as Dave. I'd had a 16K RAM pack when it first came out, and I'd type in, maybe I'd get about near the end of the typing, and I used to sit my X81 on the carpet, and I'd maybe press the return key, the spacebar key down the bottom right of the keyboard, I think it is, on the memory keyboard, and the RAM pack would wobble, and it would wipe the whole game.
asking for trouble.
But then a wonderful thing, Velcro came out, and that cured everything. But yeah, I love typing in games. Typing in typings for the Spectrum, for the X81, and I just like getting my head round how
How they worked. Yeah.
how they worked, and then applying that to your own games was pretty cool.
The thing is though, I mean, my very, very, very first computer, I wanted a Commodore, which my mum and dad are like, don't be ridiculous, son, spending, £300. And I think it was my birthday, and they were going to go to Comet in Edinburgh and get me a Spectrum, and they came back with a Texas. Which was just, there was no software available at all. So I had to basically rely on, call it computer and video games to publish listings, and it was 99% of listings from CNVG. It was either for the Spectrum, the TRS-80 or the bloody VIC-20. And very occasionally you would get a game for the Texas, and it was usually what Dave says, it was bloody blackjack or dominoes or some crap. But yeah, my one big in fact, I've got two bad experiences of again, for the Commodore 64, in fact, I'm trying to think, it must have been when I first got it and had no software, because you would never consider typing a game in when you had games to play. But it was for the Commodore 64, and me and my mate, we sat up one night and we typed this thing in, and for some reason, if you looked at a game in the Spectrum, the listing was maybe 3 pages. The Commodore version was always about 9. It was always a lot more. It must have just been the shit basic.
More memory as well.
I don't know, yeah, we sat and typed this game in, and eventually we finished, and instead of doing save, I thought, let's run it. And we ran it, and we hit return, and it went to a black screen. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. We ended up switching on and off. But the second one, which I thought I'm finished with typing listings, was Zap. Andrew Brayrook, who was, Houston programmer, did Uridium, Paradroid, etc. He had a wee column, and he actually published, it was a sort of basic with some machine code, a little program which you loaded and ran before you ran a game. And what it actually did was it actually increased the speed by something like 15-20%. And it was a big muckle program. So we sat and typed this thing in, and it took us hours because I said it was really lengthy. We saved it, and we ran it, and it just came up April Fool. And it was obviously using machine code. At no point did it say print April Fool. It was obviously data statements. But it was like, you bastard. So that was my typing listens experience.
How long did the Texas last for before you got to 64?
A very short space of time, George. I mean, the only game I actually could ever fight. I mean, you didn't get games. Nobody sold stock games for it. Though I saw a listing, I saw an advert, and I think it was CNVG. It was for Core. I think I mentioned it in one of the earlier podcasts. It was just the user-defined graphics. In fact, the idea was you have to pilot this bomb down at the bottom, which was the core, and you exploded, whatever it was. But basically, it was a letter V, and you had to navigate through like killer birds, which were just W's. It was just it moved down. It moved down in like character-based jumps, and you just use like Z and X to control it. It was absolutely awful, and it cost me £5.99. It was terrible. So yeah, I had it for a very short space of time. I don't know. I must have got some muppet to buy it off me. Yeah, there's hundreds of games for it, honest.
I had a similar experience with my dad just on a Mematech MTX. I remember them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there was no software at all for them. There was maybe 5 or 6 games, and that was it. And you had no option but to type them in from there was like a members only type magazine thing that you subscribed to. You had to sit and type in 10 pages of code, and some of them were actually pretty playable.
I think that was quite a nice looking machine.
Oh, lovely, brushed, kind of black, matte, silver and stuff. It was a beautiful machine. You could seriously, you could hurt somebody with that. It was pretty impressive.
But they support whatsoever for games.
Well, there was a few games, but it wasn't. They weren't released very often. So you had no option but to turn to the magazine, and there was no Zap magazine equivalent for this. No. This was just enthusiast kind of stuff, kind of user group kind of thing.
Yeah. So if you were a kid back then, and you were about all the retro hardware that's out now, and as a kid back in the 70s, the 80s, whatever it was, and what would be the first the worst rated machine that they could have gave you for your your Christmas, obviously apart from the Texas. Any other ones you could think of that
I win that in the competition.
you would cry if you got?
The Jupiter Race? Not the Jupiter Race, the Aquarius.
Aquarius.
It'd be the Amstrad 464, I think.
Well, come on, we're all ganging up on
I
Dave.
was
That's-
devastated.
I mean, yeah, I was unlucky to get an Aquarius for my birthday.
Did you?
Aye, and the thing was absolutely abysmal. No games for it. Didn't have a tape drive, just type-ins only.
Was it Mattel made it or something?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
isn't it? It's cheap.
Uh,
White with wee blue rubber keys, eh?
So I think looking back, if the worst one we probably got would have been that year, definitely an Aquarius. A Dragon 32, I thought, actually there's not a bad list of games for that back in the day.
It did have some games come that had your Horus.
But yeah, I'd say the Aquarius would be the worst one I would have got.
Dave, what about yourself?
I don't know. I missed the very early days of kind of weird and wonderful, 4,000 computers coming out every month and all that stuff. There was, I remember seeing an advert, a spectacular advert for an Epson machine, and I can't remember what it was actually called.
It had a tiny little grey screen.
Aye, and it was
It looked like a laptop, but it had a 2-inch screen the size of a Game Boy, and that was the screen for it.
Aye, and the advert had a guy in a business suit using it, and then bizarrely sitting in his bath using it.
Can't remember that advert, actually.
That's purely against health and safety.
Does Alan, do you know sit in the bath with your PS Vita?
I do.
There's an image for everybody.
Yes.
That's funny. You think of all the adverts for computers, it was always the quintessential American family with the mother and dad gazing lovingly like the children as they used as they're playing the latest kind of computer game, eh?
Doing the homework and spreadsheets and stuff like that.
Exactly, aye.
But I need to put the light on. I can't even see this list. It's bloody pitch black in here. Oh, that's better, right? I can see again. Good stuff. I think we've all discussed that one. Arcades, are they a viable business thing nowadays? If they were to bring out an arcade again, I'm not talking about these bloody grabbing machines or things with the wee coins. I'm talking about actual arcade games. Is it a viable thing nowadays? And what would they have to do to get people back into arcades? What do you think, Ian?
So you mean like setting up a kind of retro?
No, an actual. I mean, obviously people aren't prepared to go. Well, maybe there would be. Arcades died because the consoles caught up. What would they have to do now to make it? To get people back into arcades and pay money to play video games.
I think the problem now is going to be the lack of video games to play because all of the. I mean, I've been into Blackpool a few times recently, and all the arcades now, they're all the same kind of stuff. They're all these kind of redemption type machines, where you can win tickets and stuff.
Aye.
Kind of like games of skill, that kind of thing. And there's a few. I think nowadays it's mostly kind of big arcade games are kind of things that you can't recreate in the home. So you're talking your big massive driving simulators or things like the big gun games, where you get like a big massive 40-inch gun to point at this 75-inch screen. That's the kind of thing that you can't recreate at home, But I think most of the kind of video games that you can play at your home are, on a par or probably better than what you could play in the arcade. So I think from that standpoint, a lot of the games now are, they just wouldn't be successful.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when it go down to these big retro events, like the one that me and Alan went to, and like the one in Newcastle and Erg, and the one that's coming up in Blackpool next month, when you go down, the arcade machines there are they've got maybe about 60 arcade machines, and there's not one of them free. There's people playing them constantly. So they are popular, but I don't know how popular it would be in a bit like Edinburgh to have like. I mean, as well know they tried to launch one in Edinburgh a while back, but didn't get off the ground. But it would be great. It would be great to visit, a place in Edinburgh where they've got maybe 20 arcade machines from our past that we can play.
The problem is now, George, is that there's just so much choice for entertainment nowadays. Back in the day, you were sitting at your home with your kind of 4 TV channels and your kind of Pong system, thinking, down the arcade and play some games, but. Nowadays, I think most people would just rather sit at home in their comfortable sofa and their 40-inch television,
Play Black Ops on their PS4 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting thing because I think arcades. There's actually an article in this month's Retro Gamer about arcades, when arcades ruled the world, and there's a few popping up down in London. There's a couple of kind of custom arcades down in London, and there's a couple of new ones being set up. They're no kind of public walk-in arcades. I think a couple of them are, but there's a few are run by kind of collectors that are machines in one place. But certainly, I mean, I've listened to a few American podcasts, and FunSpot, obviously the biggest arcade in the world, that's still making a living, but it's folk like us, in our 30s and 40s that remember it, go and want to relive the old days. Kids now would maybe walk into an arcade for 5 minutes and go, this is crap. I can play better on my phone. But my stepson, years ago, not quite an arcade experience, but I was playing Sensei Soccer on the CD32, and he loves football. And he says, what's this dribble? What's this nonsense, It's the best football game you'll ever play. Never mind your 96 or whatever you're playing. And once he actually got past, looking at the tiny wee figures, I sat and I played them, and I think we had played about 12 games of it, and he loved it because it was just chaotic. So I think kids would maybe be the same if they got past the graphics, because the thing that arcades could and still do offer that nothing can is the big cabinets like Thunderblade or Outrun or something like that, where you're in that experience, the Star Wars, where you've got the flight yoke and you're sitting there in the environment, and nothing else matters. Because if you've got your own arcade cabinet at home, you've not got all the big controls, and very few people have a big sit-down cabinet and all that kind of stuff. So,
I think. Sorry, George.
I think it'd be fantastic if we did have one in the Edinburgh area. And it'd be great if we had something like, it's only a wish, but if they had the original Star Wars cabinet, but if a developer wrote a game, like a new version of Star Wars, that was installed on the cabinet, where instead of having the wireframe graphics, it was 3D, immersive 3D on the inside the cabinet would be fantastic.
There's not a 3D Star Wars that Sega released at some point. It was like something similar.
Star Wars Trilogy was released.
Yeah, that's the one.
Right,
yeah.
Where you could fight Vader and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the 32X version of Star Wars is very similar. Apart from fighting Vader, but
I think what's coming across in you guys talking is that there isn't really any new experience that an arcade could offer that's going to make you think, fuck, I need to go into Edinburgh and play this, because what is there? I mean, we're now playing games that are state-of-the-art graphics. I mean, how can you really improve? You've got your Gran Turismos, you've got your bloody, your whatever it is. We know what we're talking about. They're HD. I mean, if you start playing stuff in PCs as well, it's just the arcades couldn't. What, as you say, and you might have some kind of massive screen where you shoot things, but ultimately it's just still a shooter. I don't think consoles and home entertainment systems have moved on so much. I mean, back in the day when arcades were successful, it's because we were playing shit things like Core and Texas T1994As.
Yeah.
So, you went along and you played Commando. This is brilliant. But now we've caught up and we've surpassed it. And I think sorry.
So I was just going to say, I think it's given the experience that you can't get in the home is the key. And I remember back, years ago, I remember when Ridge Racer first came out, Namco Ridge Racer. And me and a friend would make a 30-mile round trip, several nights a week. In the car to go and play this, because it's something that you just couldn't experience. I mean, even nowadays, you haven't got the kind of surround, the cabinet experience. It's that kind of thing. And even things like, remember the kind of G-Lock cabinet? Remember that from?
Is that the one that's 360 degrees?
G-Lock 360. Yeah, I mean that kind of thing that you're never ever going to be able to recreate at home. That's what they're kind of focusing on now.
I have to say, I've got an Xbox 360 and a PS3. And they both gather dust. I play my retro systems a lot more, and I would happily give you them both for a shot in an R360 arcade cabinet.
Yep.
I don't play modern stuff. I can't be asked. I prefer my retro stuff.
Yeah.
It's
modern
funny,
stuff's too complicated. The modern stuff. That's a problem I've got. I haven't got time to sit and play 150 hours.
Learn all the key presses
to get through the thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think I think what you said, George. I mean, I think if it was viable to have an arcade filled with every arcade classic, then people like us would probably go along. We'd probably have a lads' day out, go into Edinburgh and just spend all day in the arcade. The problem I think we've got is I actually went to, there's a guy called Rav, who lived down in Oxford or Plymouth, I think it was. I actually went down there about 5 years ago. There was me and a big bunch of guys went down there, and this guy, it was a private collection. He had, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 arcade games, and it was like stepping back into a time machine. All these machines, all in free play, it was brilliant. But eventually Raf had to kind of knock it in the head, because you're I mean, one thing that people love, I've got quite a few mates who have a lot of original arcade games, and they're saying that if you're going to buy a machine, you need to be prepared to constantly maintain it. He says it's constantly breaking down. He says that's part of the fun of having an arcade cab. You're having to replace capacitors, replace screens, etc., etc. And I think this guy Rav, he just found it was just costing too much, and there wasn't enough people where he was. I mean, there wasn't enough people coming in to actually make it a viable business. One thing that I've thought about, and it's probably going to be pretty obvious why it doesn't exist, is with MAME, if you were to kind of, somehow pay the license fee or whatever it is, what is to stop you buying, 50 generic cabs, putting a little PC in it, sticking MAME in, and just having Commando running one, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. You could theoretically have 60, 70 arcade games that are not going to break down because it's a brand new PC, really reliable, but you've got the whole issue of copyright and making money and that kind of stuff. That's probably the reason why
you probably couldn't run these things in a kind of commercial setting, because you're probably breaking some kind of law somewhere, aren't you? Copyright laws and stuff.
I think you're not allowed to make money from MAME. It's in the
yeah.
I know guys that have got arcade machines that have actually, the boards have stopped working, and they have actually replaced the innards without damaging the machine, so they can put it back to normal at any time. But they've got a PC running it, booting straight into the ROM of whatever. Yep. Like Tron was one of the examples. So this machine looks and feels exactly the same as the Tron arcade cabinet, but it's a PC that's running it as opposed to the actual hardware, because the boards are, dead.
And Dave, can MAME handle things like the coin slots and stuff as well?
Oh, aye.
I've got mine. Yeah.
All right, I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah.
It's great.
Brilliant. Right, listen, guys, the very last topic, because we're kind of running on a wee bit here, we'll just talk one last one. For picking up retro bargains, is eBay still a viable place for retro bargains, George?
It's getting harder. Because you basically get to the last 5 seconds of bidding on it, you think you're going to win it, somebody else bloody gets in and buys it off you before you get it. So I'm more inclined to go for the likes of Gumtree now to buy retro bargains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably. Dave, what do you think yourself? Can you still good for bargains?
Occasionally you get the odd wee gem, but I've found myself through the happy medium of Facebook, I've made lots of friends through the communities, like I'm on the Amstrad CPC Facebook page and the Amiga page and all that kind of stuff, and you get guys on there that are saying, I've got this stuff, anybody interested, £1 each or whatever. So it's more knowing people, and I know from what I've heard as well, the arcade collectors are like that, more than, nobody in their right mind would buy an arcade machine off of eBay. You go on Jamma Plus or something like that, contacts, and you get friends, and you get decent prices for stuff.
Is it lonely on the Amstrad Facebook page?
It's a brilliant community. The Amstrad guys are superb, and they're a friendly bunch, and they're better than your Commodore.
By the way, Dave, if you see Bill, tell him I'm asking for him, eh?
Yes, aye. Thank you very much.
Ian, what about eBay? Do you still use that for retro bargains?
Well, you do get the occasional bargain. Occasionally people will put things up 99 pence thinking it's an auction, but it's actually a buy it now. I was watching, when I was looking for some Neo Geo carts last week, and I was searching, put it in order of most recently listed, and there was a couple of carts came up. Usually go for maybe like 60 or 70 quid, and the guy put them on for 99 pence, buy it now.
Oh.
With like £9, £9 or £10 postage, and they were gone instantly, But you're thinking to yourself, and you can probably he'll probably just say, that was a mistake, and cancel it. And I kind of felt bad at first, because thinking there's no way that if I bid on that, if I buy that there's no way I'm going to get it because the guy's just going to say, sorry mate, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
But I think eBay's its own worst enemy now as well because, I mean, it's all the fees and stuff. I mean, people are having to pump the prices up to kind of make their money back. And I think that the kind of days of bargains on eBay are pretty much gone now.
I tend to agree. I mean, I've sold obviously a lot of stuff on eBay, and I mean, I sold what did I sell recently? I sold a phone, well, maybe 6 months ago, and I thought, 160 quid, oh yeah, beauty. And then what I don't like is they take about 3-4 weeks before you get the fees. Yeah. It's like eBay bill £37. It's like, for fuck's sake. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, eBay, 10 years ago was the place to go for bargains, but people now are just asking ridiculous prices for stuff, things that you just simply know that's not worth that. But the strange thing is, if you go into, I was looking for sort of rough prices for this Virtual Boy thing and the 32X. If you go into like completed auctions, you'll find a huge scale of stuff being sold. It's like, wow, and you think to yourself, well, the guy's wanting say £100 for it, but that one there went for 60, and then you look at another three and they went for like £250. I think it is a bit of luck, but people are I certainly don't think it's worth that. I mean, it's eBay is overpriced now.
Yeah, like what Dave said earlier. If you go into eBay and look up the price of something, and then if you go on to kind of the more private forums or Facebook pages, you pretty much half the price, and you'll pick it up from people who are kind of wanting to, members of the community, and not looking to make a huge profit. Maybe some profit, but not a huge one.
Genuine people.
Yeah. I think the place, as George says, the place for sort of bargains is Gumtree, and you get some naive father selling all his sons from the loft, like I did when I bought the Spectrum toaster plus a 40k. I got that for, it was £18 or something, and
Well, one of the best things back in the day was buying something off somebody who didn't realise what they had.
Yeah.
So he said, I'll give you 20 quid for that. It's worth about 400 quid.
And the same as I got the Atari 800, which was one of my holy grails, the original Atari 800 computer. I got that, 6 months ago, and I got it from a guy who was selling his dad's stuff, and I got it for a cracking price.
Yeah,
absolutely cracking price. But
eBay's ruined things like car boot sales now as well to an extent because people know what everything's worth now.
Case in point, the Master System that George was going to buy,
and they'll go on eBay and they'll see one that went for 800 quid and think, 800 quid, But the fact is, I mean, I think that happened. I think it was a NES went on eBay for 800 quid because it had one rare cartridge with it. One of these kind of gold one of these things is uber rare focal, and the guy just basically paid 800 quid for the cartridge essentially, and now everyone's thinking, man, NES is worth 800 quid.
That is a problem. So,
and that's a problem with eBay. It's just ruined the kind of and those auctions as well. Just the prices just get driven up and up and up.
Yep.
No, well, listen, guys. I think the very, 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 very last thing we'll talk about because we're running on is we're just going to. Is there a YouTube channel you've been watching? Is there a YouTube channel you want to give a heads up to that we think's really, really good? Ian, have you got any particular YouTube channel?
Yeah, one of my favourite YouTube channels. I've been watching this guy for years. It's the YouTube channel name is Cinemassacre. I don't know if you guys have heard of that.
Not heard of that one, no.
He's the guy that does the Angry Video Game Nerd.
Oh, right, I've heard of him, yeah.
That's the man. James Rolfe, I think his name is. And he does the Angry Video Game Nerd, and they've got a movie coming out soon as well. I don't know if that's going to play in cinemas or on YouTube. I have no idea how that's going to be released, but looking forward to that. He does other kind of reviews as well. He's a big enthusiast of movies as well. So he does reviews of films. He's done reviews of quite interesting retro movie playing hardware. Things like alternatives to laser discs, these kind of Chinese cartridge things, big 12-inch kind of things that went, they're almost like record player type things that played back movies and stuff, and he does things like he sits down with his pal, I think it's Mike, and they'll just sit and play a game for like half an hour, and tear it to shreds, and they'll pick out all the faults with it, and they'll sit down and they'll show you all the hacks and cheats and stuff and all the kind of flaws in the game. And I just find the guy's just very, very watchable. And there's a whole library of the Angry Video Game Nerd stuff. The older stuff's probably a bit kind of better, I think. But if you got a spare half an hour, you could do worse.
Stick a link up on our Facebook page, though.
Some old AVGN episodes. There's some really cracking, there's some really hilarious stuff. They're kind of gone overboard a bit now with the kind of CGI and special effects. But the guy's he's very watchable.
Good one. What about yourself, Dave? Was it Finn? You've touched on this Finn guy, yeah?
There's a couple of ones that I watch regularly. Finn Gamer he's a collector who loves Nintendo stuff, but he's got some cracking stuff on there, and he's very watchable. You know, you could he reads manuals and stuff out on the channel, and you can listen to him reading the back of a him, John's Arcade, which for the arcade stuff, he's an American chap, but his arcade stuff is fantastic, all sorts of tutorials and things. But there's a local guy, he's certainly got a Scottish accent, I don't know where he's from, but his YouTube channel is called Retro Game Tech, that's TECH, and he has got a small but cracking collection of consoles, and he's into the electronics, and he strips things down, and he mods consoles and does all sorts of things. He ripped a Sky HD box apart and took the hard drive out it and kept all the various bits and bobs, because he says, you can use that in here, and that's a 500 gig hard drive you can hook up to stuff. So he's got all this cracking stuff, and he's modded his Sega Mega Drive and things and put all sorts of switches in it. So, like I say, he's got a Scottish accent. I don't actually know where he's from.
Was that the one you linked to? He put increase the speed of his Mega Drive?
Yes.
I watched that. That looks quite interesting, actually.
So he's a good watch. Retro Game Tech.
Good. Again, stick his link up on Facebook, Dave.
Will do.
Yep, excellent. George, you got one website or one YouTube channel you could recommend?
I've got a couple. I've got a chap called Paul Jenkins.
That's the one I'm picking. I'll mention that one.
Now you can mention Paul. I've got another one is Monkey Spaz 5000. He's lives in the Edinburgh, Scottish area. He's really good he's a big Spectrum fan as well. One that this guy lives in America. His name's Gamester81. Have any of you guys heard of him?
No.
Nope.
He's a massive retro console and PC collector. He's got some really rare machines that I've never even heard of before. He's worth a look in. Anyone else? Lawn Boys Post 1975.
He's good. I like him.
He's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've not heard this guy. His name's the Shadow's Nose.
He's funny. He's really funny. I don't know what nationality it is, but he reviews different games.
He's Austrian, German. Yep, something like that. He's really good.
Yep.
I had another one, but for life I can't remember what his name is. But that's like kind of the main ones that I always watch.
There's two, apart from the obvious ones like Stuart Ashen, Steve Benway, etc. There's two. There's one. Now I don't know if I think I might have put a link to it. I don't. The guy's like Finnish or whatever it is, and he's just hilarious. He actually ropes his wife and her friends into making videos and all that kind of stuff. It's just he's so funny. He's right into his kind of virtual. I can't remember what he's called. Something Rolly or Vectrex Rolly. No, Vectrex Rolly or something he's called. He's hilarious. He says he gets his wife. His wife, she takes part in it as well. She'll go, "What are you playing now?" He goes, "Oh, you know my video games. What do you like your video games?" It's funny. Really, it really goes over the top, like, but brilliant. I'll post that. And the second one was what George mentioned, Paul Jenkinson, called The Spectrum Show. It's maybe last half an hour, and he has like different features, like the news and sort of April 1983, blah 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 blah, and then he has like type in listings, and he reviews old games, he get the top 10 games, etc. Then he reviews some newer games, but I mean his presentation is just fantastic. I don't know what he uses to actually put these things together, the credits and the way the sort of things sweep in and out, like, but for if you're into the Spectrum Show is worth checking out. Absolutely brilliant.
The last chap, I think it's maybe the guy that Dave's on about, but his name's Mark Payne, and he could be this retro tech guy that Dave's speaking about.
Right.
He is really good. His channel, I have subscribed to his channel, but I can't remember what his channel's name is. But it's probably one that Dave mentioned.
Retro Game Tech, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's him.
So, and listen, guys, the very, very last thing is next club night. We've got it. It's the next Wednesday, the 16th of April, I think it is, Georgie.
Yes.
Usual place, Gorgie Parish Church, 7:30 to 10:30. Don't knock on the door, ring the bell. So that's Wednesday, the 16th of April.
Is
So
that our new? Is that our new motto then? Is it?
Aye.
I said that a couple of times now. Don't knock the door, ring the bell.
It might be worth pointing out there's actually 2 doorbells. Do they both ring the same?
Aye. Just ring them both.
ring them both and wait for somebody to come to the door.
Until
right?
some angry person comes to the door, keep ringing.
Yeah.
So listen, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be at podcast number 6 in 2 weeks' time. And thanks for taking part, guys. And we'll catch up soon.
We'll see you later.
See you. Bye.
Cheers,
Cheers, guys.